have, I regret to say, only a very limited amount of time for audience question and answers. I would ask the expert witnesses who have testified today to kindly come forward to the front, or possibly if you're near the front, you can come forward when a question is directed to you. Do come forward. Yes, I think that's better. Thank you, Barbara. If the expert witnesses would kindly come to the front. I should mention that because our time is so short, you remember that we need absolutely to be out of the room before 6 o'clock, and that means entirely cleared out. Members of the organizing committee have kindly gone through the written questions that audience members have passed forward to us in order to reduce the degree of repetition and overlap. Please be assured that your questions will all be responded, will all receive responses. We will answer as many as possible at this time now. First question to all witnesses who have active or recent academic positions: what is the extent and/or depth of interest in your views of 9/11 by your academic colleagues? That's a question to all of the witnesses who have active or recent academic positions.
Well, very little. I don't know what else to say. I mean, that's as much as I need to say.
Speak from here.
Yeah, yes, do speak from here, Barbara.
This is not on, I don't think.
Oh,
Oh, is it on?
yes, it is.
Okay. Until my retirement from the Naval Postgraduate School about July 1st. For 15 years, I was the senior military affairs journalist there, but I also participated in the academic world there. And talk to me afterwards about individual incidents, but I'm just going to give you one example. For reasons that I do not understand, because I have been active, like Cynthia McKinney's been active, and Richard Gage and David Ray Griffin, as active in saying what I've said here today, and you saw the power of what I told you. I proved my case that the Pentagon was attacked from the inside with explosives, just like the World Trade Center on 9/11. I've been saying that ever since 9/11 while I was in a DoD job. As the chief journalist at the Naval Postgraduate School, the U.S. government's premier science, technology, and national security affairs university. And I asked myself, this is a test. Are they going to let me in the gate? Every single day I asked myself. And every day they let me in the gate. So I won't go into why I think that is now, except I think that, well, I will. I believe that there are people very high up in the military who like what we are doing but don't feel that they can come forward without jeopardizing their positions, like the gentleman who came from the military to Cynthia right after 9/11 and said this is being planned for at least 10 years, and yes, Cynthia, I have information that I will share with you that absolutely supports that, especially the theft of the 2000 election also, directly linked to 9/11. So, and then I'll give you just one other example. I was supported, and I did just simply retire. However, and I did a very good job at my job. I mean, my articles are still online. But I'm going to give you another example. This university has about 2,000 senior military officers down to usually mid-career military officers who are students in a graduate school. And one of them, then they go off to Afghanistan or Iraq or wherever they go. This one woman learned about my public speaking on 9/11, and I've published. And she came into my office very sheepily one day in her military uniform, and she said, "Are you Barbara?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Do you think maybe I could have one of your tapes and my DVDs?" And I said, "Well, sure, I'll bring it in." So a couple of days later, she came in, I gave it to her. I didn't expect her to give it back. I meant her to have it. Just before she went off to Afghanistan, about 2 months later, she came into my office and she said, this was the DVD, she said, "Thank you very much for letting me have this, but I just haven't been able to watch it." Of course she watched it. So there's a perfect example of this groupthink and this fear mentality, but I know for a fact that every single one of those individuals who are in the military, who have been exposed to the truth by myself and others, and I've been doing it from the inside of DOD now for 10 years, they really want to come over to our side, most of them.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Another question, and this I think could be answered by any of the panelists. Why has no one drawn attention to Building 6, which can be seen being destroyed by a huge explosion before the Twin Towers came down?
Building 6 was right under the towers, and it suffered a whole lot of damage as a result of the falling debris. There is a series of explosions which emit a whole lot of dust and so forth. The video is not clear as to whether that's coming from Building 6 or not. There's arguments on both sides of this fence. But there's a huge hole in the middle of Building 6. And some believe that it was, this is the Department of Treasury was in this building, and there's a lot that was going on with that department that somebody may not have wanted exposed also. So anyway, that's a lot of speculation. Beyond that.
Thank you, Richard. Another question, if flight manifests don't show hijackers' names, why don't the airlines object to the government's adding of them to their passenger lists?
I want to make a comment about that. I saw in that Musawi trial, I think you got to check this out, that actually one of those manifests have been released. I mean, check out. Be sure that you're right on that. It doesn't mean a lot, but you know, you have to check it out. But I'm almost sure. I look sometimes at the 9/11 Myths site to check out what they're saying and what evidence they got. I will tell you that I got on to this thing about the release of the Sella document from looking at the 9/11 Myths thing, but it's right there in front of me. I mean, they found something that I hadn't seen, and I took account of it. So, you know, I don't know what else to say.
I don't know. Could you repeat that question or rephrase it? Or, yeah.
Sorry, let me see if I've got it. Yes, I'm sorry, here it is, Jay. If flight manifests don't show hijackers' names, why don't the airlines object to the government's adding of them to their passenger lists?
Okay. You want to go ahead. You try it.
Well, I'm going to give this back to him, but really quickly. If I recall correctly, the Congress couldn't vote fast enough to give a whole bunch of money to the airlines. It was hush money.
This is tangential to that. There is documented evidence.
Hold it very close.
Okay, there's documented evidence. Boston Globe presented a copy of what they said was a flight manifest. It came out in their news story, I believe, maybe October 2006. And on this flight manifest were all the hijackers' names in the final FBI list, except for one. That one's names on the flight manifest was, let's see how I get this right, Abdul Rahman Al-Omari, the post-mortem guy that was, he you know, couldn't have been on the second list. He turned himself in as still alive. And it should have been the second one whom the FBI said was on their final, the person who replaced Abdul Rahman Al-Omari was Abdul Aziz Al-Omari on the final list of 19. The guy that you saw in the Portland video along with, Atta. So neither of them was, and the FBI still has refused to change their story.
Thank you. Oh,
just a comment on my earlier comment. It's important for people to know, and I meant to add it, that the Department of Defense's, the Pentagon's own autopsy report states explicitly that there was no DNA, Arab DNA, found in any of the remains from the official story. In other words, from Flight 77 passengers or in the building.
Thank you. Another question, how much money was made on the 9/11 puts on the companies affected by 9/11?
You don't mind if I come up here? No. Actually, I'm glad that was asked because I was going to say it and I forgot to say it. My estimate is the maximum just on the puts is $30 million. The maximum on the puts is $30 million. Okay, doesn't mean it could be less, but it's not more than that. And I'll repeat again that doesn't depend upon the statistical theory or econometric procedures that I described. It depends upon just simple calculations of how much open interest was at the end of the day on September 10th, and then how much executions took place until October 22nd.
Thank you. This is a question, I think, for Jay Kolar. How reliable are CCTV images with security stamps? Isn't it possible to modify the stamps?
I'm not a CCT technologist. I don't CCTV. I think that it's not possible. But then, you know, if you're working for an intelligence community, you probably have all those. The technology is really advanced. I don't think it's possible to get into those video cameras.
Thank you. Is another question?
Well, I just wanted to say I do think it is. If it's digital, you can change it. But the question is, do you have even higher technology to detect the changes?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Another question, is there any public right to have 9/11 put investors identified? Investors who lost millions were publicly identified in the Madoff scandal.
Somebody asked me about that during the break, and that gave me some thought about it. The Madoff scandal investors had lost money. They may have stepped forward and said, you know, you cost me $10 million, and therefore they gave permission for their name to come forward. We have the opposite case here. In other words, what I was trying to say is that the government knows the names, but that we are not entitled to that kind of private information. So the information is there in the government. Now you can correct me here, but if there was a legal proceedings with a subpoenaed evidence, that the judge might decide that some of these names could be released, but it would probably be the judge's decision about which would remain private and which would come out in the public record.
Thank you. This is a question for Barbara Honegger. Was testing conducted of the Pentagon rubble to determine explosive residue?
No.
That doesn't come as a surprise. Another question?
Not that we know of, no.
Right, thank you.
There's no mention of it at all in the ASCE report. And in fact, one of the reasons that the caveat at the beginning of the ASCE, American Society of Civil Engineers, Pentagon performance report on the damage and how the building stood up after the attacks of 9/11, the fact that that it says basically we don't stand by anything we say in our own report, I read that to you, the caveat at the beginning, the disclaimer. One of the reasons is that the ASCE investigators weren't allowed in until all the rubble was cleared, everything. And they came in and put gravel over what would have been the area that you could see if there was any damage right outside the building or on the lawn.
Yeah, thanks. If anyone has critical information on 9/11 being an inside job, who should they report it to for it to be investigated?
To the Mike Gravel state initiatives.
Thank you. Here's a question, an online question for Jay Kolar. Have any of the living hijackers spoken lately in public?
Well, no, and the reason why, if you want me to speculate about that, I will.
Certainly.
The reason why is that 15 out of the 19 were Saudis, And you can probably picture the king of Saudi Arabia. Well, let's just put it this way. Saudi intelligence, Saudi covert operations are all run through the king. You know, the royal family owns it, the GID, Government Directorate. And so there'd be no problem giving them new identities, you know, or tucking them away somewhere. And the rest who came forward, they had to be probably liquidated. As well, I'm saying, such as Ziad Jarrah, he had to be liquidated, but I mean, he was definitely not alive. He's the one case that goes against the grain.
But the answer is no. No one has done a public interview.
No, you see, if people say, well, how can you say they were still alive after 9/11? Well, they were alive after 9/11. They're reported as such by all these major news organizations. One of them, such as Walid al-Shari, who comes from a very prominent family called the Sekali al-Shari. See, a lot of people say, oh, they had names that are very common. Al-Shari, that's like saying Jones in this country. But the Sekali al-Shari name, the father, Mohammed, he had gotten contracts to do, he was heavily into construction work through the bin Laden family. So, I mean, there's all kinds of ties. The Sekali al-Shari, the uncle of the two boys, Walid and Wa'il, was the head of the armed forces for Saudi Arabia. All kinds of connections there. And then you have, well, the fact that Walid al-Shari was still alive, he reported it. He went to the Moroccan embassy. He was a pilot for Air Morocco, I believe. And that was reported by David Bamford of BBC. And very unprecedented, BBC changed their story under pressure from political pressure, probably from the FBI.
Thank you, Jay. An online question for Michelle Chossudovsky. Does installing LIFG in Tripoli act as a NATO UN endorsement of Al-Qaeda?
Well, the answer to that is no, because, sorry, you can sit here.
Well, be careful with the...
No, the answer to that is no. They can't endorse terrorism because they deny the existence of the LIFG, despite the fact it's on their records. I mean, I went to the United Nations Security Council website and I checked, and it's still there. They've reclassified so that the original link that I got in April came down in June, and I think actually it's still up there. But the LIFG is still classified as a terrorist organization, and what they say is that these people are former terrorists. They cannot themselves endorse terrorism. That would be a non sequitur. But we can certainly underscore the fact that they are, in actuality, endorsing these organizations and using them to invade and occupy a sovereign country.
Thank you very much. An online question for Richard Gage. What do you think of alternate theories of the destruction of the World Trade Center, like mini nukes and DEW, the directed energy weapons, I believe that stands for?
There's a number of theories out there, and what you want to do when examining these is test them against the scientific method. Is the theory supported by the evidence? You saw the evidence today for the explosive destruction of these towers. Explosive destruction uses explosives. One of these theories, the DEW theory, directed energy weapons, promoted by Judy Wood, denies the explosions that we've documented here. They deny the evidence of the molten metal, previously molten iron microspheres in the World Trade Center dust, and denies the existence, even, of the high-tech nanothermite composite explosives that you're going to learn about tomorrow that exists in all the dust. So when somebody comes forward with a theory that denies all the evidence that we know to be really quite solid forensic science-based evidence, I don't have much faith in that theory. And in the case of the mini nukes theory, there's been a number of nuclear physicists who have said there's not a signature that of radiation and so forth that supports the hypothesis of the destruction of these buildings by smaller nuclear weapons. Well, they say, oh no, these are fourth generation nukes. They don't leave radiation. Okay, let's talk about aliens. You know, we just don't have a way to go forward based on rational discourse with some of these theories.
Thank you very much. We have an online question.
Could I just add one
Actually,
sentence?
Barbara-
There's a difference between ionizing and non-ionizing radiation. There's no evidence of ionizing radiation.
Okay, thank you. An online question. 85 security cameras, camera footage from 85 security cameras not released. Would those cameras show the front of the Pentagon? I suppose that must be for you, Barbara.
Okay, let me repeat back the question to make sure I understand it.
The question, it's a little bit cryptic, but I think the meaning is the footage from 85 security cameras not released. Would that footage have shown the front of the Pentagon?
Well, the question shows a
perhaps
misunderstanding. The Pentagon has 5 fronts. So I think the question means, and a top and a bottom.
I think it must mean the side that was hit.
I think it means the west face, technically the southwest face. The only ones that matter are the ones that the ones that they confiscated are the only ones that would have shown anything about the alleged impact point and damage at the Pentagon, which would have been, yes, the west face. However, remember in my talk, and please come up to me and give me your email address and I will send you my whole PowerPoint because I only was able to do half of my talk, okay? I want everyone to have it. However, in my talk that I did get to, I did analyze those 85 tapes or give you the information from the FBI's own FOIA officer, and the other 83 show nothing to do with any possibility of an impact, according to the FBI's own analysis. Only the 2 that were released in the Moussaoui trial, of which one of the 2 is the 5 famous frames, of which there's only one of the 5 frames that's an explosion, which does not show an impact of any kind, let alone a plane, and could easily have been the result of an impact at the building or inside.
Thank you very much. We have 2 more questions. I think we can hope to get through these 2. Isn't it true that April Gallup's lawsuit against Cheney, Rumsfeld, and former Chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Richard Myers, was dismissed by Judge John M. Walker of the Second Circuit of the United States Court of Appeals, a cousin of George W. Bush?
Well, they voted against her, yes. But she's considering an appeal, I believe. Go to, what's the name of Bill Veal's website? Do you remember? Well, anyway, see me afterwards. I'll give you, her attorney is William Veal, whom I know, of the East Bay in California, not far from where I live. And in fact, I got them together after I did my under oath 2-hour videotaped interview of April Gallup and gave it to her attorney. My understanding is, and it's all on the website, including all of the documents from both sides of the case, it was at the second level rejected by, I believe it was a 3-judge panel, the deciding vote of which was an uncle, I believe, of George W. Bush. But they're considering an appeal. I don't know if they've done it or they're going to do it. I haven't gone there for a while.
Thank you very much. And a last question, and I'll ask for a very brief answer. This is for Professor Chossudovsky. Did ISI's transfer of $100,000 to Mohammed Atta, was it intended, I think the intention of the question is, to later frame Pakistan? I'm a little puzzled by the question, but can you answer that?
Well, I don't know whether that particular event was to frame Pakistan. I don't think so, but certainly Pakistan has been framed. Okay, that's for sure. And I think that transition came with the assassination of Benazir Bhutto and the transition to a so-called civilian government. It was the end of an era of military dictators, and it led into a new relationship and a new kind of, it was a regime change in essence, and it is a de facto invasion of that country because, in fact, they control the airspace. They are attacking territories within Pakistan, and I think Pakistan, yes, was framed into the broader Af-Pak war, using the war on terrorism as a pretext to wage a war on a country which is Pakistan, a large country of 130, 40 million people. Now, again, what this underscores is the fact that the ISI was complicit with the CIA in supporting the terrorists covertly. And now what is happening is that the United States is dwelling upon the Pakistani support to the terrorists, which they did on behalf of the United States, but which now is considered as to be a crime of lèse-majesté, which then gives the pretext to invade them, when in fact they were working with them. Okay?
Thank you, Michel. I'm sorry to be cutting off what a response which I would love to hear more of, but we now need to close today's session.